Welcome. I'm Angelica.
And I'm Gaia. Today we're speaking to Alex, co-founder of carbon-rich soil additive Black Bull Biochar. Hi, Alex.
You nailed it, by the way. Hi, nice to meet you. I'm Alex.
Thanks for coming today. So what is biochar?
What is biochar? Biochar is basically a means of storing carbon in an agricultural product, which is like a very stable form of charcoal. So it's very different to what you put on your barbecue. I should make that really clear. But it's basically almost a pure form of carbon, but it's also a physical product. What excites me about it is that it also has lots of properties, like agronomic and economic beneficial properties. So you can apply this to soils and mix it with different sort of organic fertilizers like slurry or farmer manure, and bolster the yield of your soils without using nasty artificial fertilizers. And
so how did you come to create this?
It's a very good question. I was thinking about it on the way here. I think I've answered that differently every time someone's asked me. There's almost 3 points of origination. I won't go through all of them, but the first point is, like, in an early part of my career, I worked for a think tank that they're called the Royal Society. Yeah. They're technically 400 years old, but they have like a team that specialise on looking at new technologies and advising big government and industry on what those technologies are. And we did stuff on green hydrogen, green ammonia, how to capture CO2 and use it in different funky ways. And one of these ways was through biochar. So I worked with some great scientists of just trying to communicate what on earth this product is. I'm still trying to do that now, actually. And it just got me really excited. It was the only way I saw that you could store carbon, but also it's not going to cost the taxpayer millions of pounds. And for anyone who's ever heard about carbon storage, they usually hear about giant sort of offshore sort of rig type things where you pipe CO2 from industry underground into the North Sea. It's extremely expensive and requires the taxpayer to pay all of it.
Okay, you're going to have to bear with me here. Okay. What's the importance of storing carbon?
Really good point. And it's the underlying theme for all this, I suppose. So you may have heard of the Paris Agreement, which is the 2015 agreement between almost all nations that we need to actually get to net zero and limit global warming to 1.5 degrees. Now, what that then means for countries is that not only do we need to reduce the amount of emissions we're letting off, we also need to start removing CO2 from the atmosphere. And where biochar is quite unique is that it actually removes CO2 from the atmosphere through the process of making it. As nations, we all need to be removing roughly 7 to 9 gigatons of CO2. Now, what does that even mean? That's roughly the equivalent of the emissions from all the sort of production and transport of oil and gas annually. So it's a serious amount of CO2 to make sure we get down to that 1.5 degree target.
And how competitive is it as a space?
It's become very competitive, actually, the last sort of 5 years or so. So as a lot of different governments and investors have realized this is coming, and suddenly these targets you might have heard about 2030 or 2050 targets for countries and companies, those are now around the corner. They used to sound like dates that were a long way away. Sadly, we're at 2025 already. And if you think the average energy technology, like solar or wind or something, takes roughly 30 to 100 years to take from ideation to commercial deployment, we basically need to deploy all this stuff now. So during COVID, loads of investors started. It was basically just before we had this AI wave of investment, all went into green stuff. And a lot of this was carbon removal technologies. The most famous of which is Climeworks in Switzerland. They landed around about 660 million into what's called direct air capture. So it's like a competitor technology to biochar. And that's literally sucking CO2 straight out of the atmosphere using different sort of solvents and things like that.
And so who is your target consumer? Who are you selling this to? Is it B2B or more B2C?
Now, this is where it gets a bit complex, which is fun if the last 10 minutes wasn't complex enough already. So we actually have 3 different customer bases. And this is where these kind of companies are quite hard to set up initially. Once you get going, they're quite exciting. So the process of making our product makes a lot of hot water. And that's almost like zero emission, renewable hot water. So our first customer base is actually big industrial companies. So we work with 2 big sort of billion turnover companies up in the north of England. And we flush hot water from our machinery that's making our biochar product into their industrial boilers, which allows them to use less oil and gas and decarbonize as well.
That's crazy.
So that's like revenue stream number 1. Revenue stream number 2 is the biochar product itself. So it has a really strong agronomic value. So we work with a B2B and B2C model on that. We actually have supermarkets who are buying our biochar product for their supply chain, for their farmers, but we also work directly with farmers. And though the scalable route is definitely always B2B, it's great to have a bit of B2C because you get that feedback from your customers about how the product works, how can we iterate on it, how can we improve it. And the third revenue stream is carbon credits. So you might have heard about carbon credits or carbon removal credits. And that is basically large corporates buying the removal aspect of our business and buying the fact that carbon is being taken out the atmosphere and putting that on their carbon accounting books.
Amazing. So from ideation to execution, how long was that process? And
yeah, quite long.
And how did you adapt?
Yeah, so this is where we're really lucky. So first of all, shout out to my co-founder Hamish. So he has a PhD in biochar. Without a Hamish, I wouldn't really be here.
Everyone needs a Hamish.
Exactly. And so we've got quite a nice balance of CEO and CTO. He's definitely got the big brains, and I do the sort of other stuff. And so yeah, we conjured this business together as a part of a government innovation competition.
Wow. When was that?
This is about 3-4 years ago now. So it's around 2021 was when we were doing this. And this is where the UK is actually quite good, is that we do have quite good startup programs like this that government funds.
Yeah.
So me and
I see a lot of those on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I see a lot of the invest in female talent as well sort of programs.
Absolutely. No, it invests in everyone from all sorts of walks of life. And sometimes it's as little as 20K. And my background was in R&D and sustainability consulting. And so me and Hamish worked when I was a consultant and he was doing his PhD. We worked on a sort of year-long project of how to build this business before building it. And that's actually where we were really lucky, because we spent, I think, unlike most founders, we spent a lot of time actually figuring out, right, what is going to work? And we test that with a lot of big agri-food companies, big industrial companies, and sense check the business model before building it.
How long was that process? How many iterations did you have to go through?
I think we're still iterating, to be fair. But definitely, there's probably 2 major iterations in our business model. One was when we originally thought what we needed was more of a platform style business, where actually we wouldn't be doing the hands-on on operations and running the machinery ourselves. And when we thought naively we could get subcontractors to do this, it'd be really easy. There's loads of industrial subcontractors that run these kinds of machines. Actually, when you get into the nitty-gritty, it's quite hard to do that unless you have your own specialist operators. So we made quite a big pivot there of being hands-on on industrial sites, operators there that we hire and our employees. And the second big pivot actually was around the biochar product itself. So we've got much more into developing a deep sort of intellectual property approach to our biochar and making specialized biochars for different use cases on farm. So we're developing one for poultry right now, for chicken farming right now, which can help them reduce phosphate runoff into rivers. And
when did you first bring the product to market?
First brought it, well, actually, that was probably about, it's quite late, actually probably about 2 years in to the business. Yeah. And that's where, again,
when did you found the business, sorry?
2022. That was when we found
recently.
It. So it was actually a spin-out business as well. So I should acknowledge, so that when I was at the consultancy, one of the reasons I've had very cool bosses there, David Rocha and Federico Magalini, give them a shout out. Very kindly hired me with the remit to actually trying to spin out companies.
Cool.
So if you want to, if anyone listening wants to inspire their team at all to do cool stuff, give an employee 1 day a week that they're allowed to think of ideas and try and sketch out startups. And that's what I did for them. And then we spun out Black Bull Biochar from that consultancy into where we are today.
So how big is your team now, and what area in particular are you focusing on? What operations, marketing, what's your focus?
So we only actually, then we rolled our product out about a year ago. We actually, we've pretty much been an R&D company until 3 months ago. So we commercialized literally in April and started selling our product for the first time. So all those 3 revenue streams basically kicked in of carbon, biochar, and renewable heat. And so what's the big change for our team right now is moving from a sort of 9-10 person team of being quite sort of project R&D focused into that much more commercial type team. So we're just closing our round right now, and that's all geared at scaling sales teams, marketing teams, because right now, my role is quite generalized across a lot of those. And I'm quite excited, to build a sales and marketing team in Manchester.
And what was that funding process like?
I mean, I wish I'd done it about 3 years ago. There's definitely this huge switch right now, as everyone's quite aware of AI focus from investors. And then you've got the global political stuff happening around the green technologies. Yeah. And add on to that, there were a relatively large amount of poor investments made in green technology about 3-4 years ago with the COVID sort of boom. So you've got a lot of investors also going, oh, I feel like a bit exposed there in my portfolio.
Poor investments?
Yeah, relatively, yeah. So
interesting.
So this will be happening with AI right now as well, right? When you get these like boom themes, it's not necessarily a bubble, but it gets a lot of interest, and every investor feels like, oh my God, I need to have something in this space.
Creates urgency.
It creates that urgency. You get those big booms, and we had it with green stuff 3-4 years ago. We're having it with AI now. And what's good though about landing investment right now is that the investors are really savvy about what kind of green technology you're trying to build. They've seen decks similar to yours before, and so they're really looking for something genuinely unique. And so I'm really pleased with the investor sort of consortium we built on this pathway. But yeah, it's been long, definitely. I mean, yeah, say it used to take 3 to 6 months to do raises in this space 3-4 years ago. It's definitely about a year, I think, for most startups or other founders I'm talking to for that investment process.
And what would you say is a good product that's solving an issue versus one that's maybe a bit more of a pseudo product?
Ooh, what, just generally right now?
Just generally, yeah. If you're an investor and you see a deck and you're like, I've seen this before, what do you think would stand out as something that would actually make an impact?
The thing I would go on right now is I think the gear changers, they want to see much earlier commercial traction. So I think that not necessarily about the product, but it's about where you are in your business cycle. I think investors are much more cautious now about investing in something which could land customers in the future. They want to see who are your customers right now. And that's where we've been quite fortunate, although we work quite hard on it, is in landing the likes of supermarkets for our biochar offtakes or banks for our carbon offtakes. And getting those big sort of customers in early and showing the investors confidence in what we're trying to do. But if I wasn't investing in my business and I was thinking about other products out there, the thing that probably excites me the most actually is around energy efficiency. And it's quite a boring area. Actually, I was listening to one of your podcasts earlier of someone doing stuff in frozen foods. And on a similar level, you don't think of it as a sexy area.
Yeah.
But actually, energy efficiency, it's wild how easy it is to put in like some data sensors on different big industrial sites or even office spaces and see what's happening, and you realize half the stuff in this building is on at night and doesn't need to be. And those sort of really simple technologies, there's still a lot of space for innovation there. And if I was not investing in us,
energy
I'd look at
efficiency
that.
as in literally just cutting back on how much you're putting out there.
Yeah, how much looking at? I mean, I don't know what maybe this office space is quite green, but I wouldn't be surprised that I've got no idea. But
Take
Got a
notes,
nice
guys.
plant, got a nice plant over there.
yeah, it's lovely as a decor in here, I must say. But say at night, I don't know what's happening in these buildings, but a lot of buildings across London will be empty, but they might be running AC the whole night. And check in. It's good to check in. What's interesting for us as a carbon-focused business, we check in with all parts of our supply chain around carbon emissions. So we will ask, what are your energy bills to our offices? And actually, a lot of companies, naturally, you rent your office space, you may not ask that, but some of these things are pretty high.
In terms of price, would you say that that's a challenge for you, price parity with what's already out there?
Yeah, so this is a good question, because naturally when you start any new product or new market, your price point's always going to be higher than sort of established competitors. Where we've had some really exciting results, then this has again been key for the government funding we received. We managed to run trials of our product for 2 to 3 years without charging a farmer. And so that meant farmers get comfortable with the technology. And again, where our biochar product was very different is that we got year-on-year yield increases on their land through one application. Now, most farmers are applying artificial fertilizer every year, and if they don't do that, they don't get any of their yield increases. So where you get quite a different approach and sort of value prop is the long-term benefits of our product make the price point actually quite appealing. However, you look at it at face value, it will feel more expensive to an artificial fert. And again, if we didn't have these great research trials run independently of us and funded by the government, we wouldn't be able to prove that to farmers. So they get comfortable. And if you know farmers, they're not necessarily the easiest people to part with cash. So that's been a big part for me and Hamish, is sitting down in pubs and doing a lot of kitchen table chats with farmers and their families. And that's what I probably love about this business the most in many ways, is actually the customer base is a really fun customer base. And I did some farm visits down on the South Downs on Friday. I think I did 3 hours with one family at a table, and I learned so much about them, but also what's happening in farming around them. And you can see where our value props start to hit them across the supply chain, which is quite interesting.
So how are you?
Sorry.
So how are you gonna educate the farmers? Are you already thinking about an education program? Are you already thinking about a sales team that's going to take care of that.
Yeah, no, exactly, and that's the big push in the next year or two. Like we've come into this phase now that we are selling products, and we need to ensure we have the team that has the knowledge base to educate or perhaps guide farmers. A lot of farmers are now quite familiar with the product, which is great. So it's getting out there. But a lot of that is actually going through also aggregates. So when we work with, say, a big supermarket, or we work with a big aggregate like Arla Foods or Avara Foods, very similar names, but actually completely different companies. One's a big poultry company, one's a big dairy company. The best thing is going through them, because they'll have, say, Arla has 2,000 farmers in the UK. Avara have about 300 or 400. And actually the best way to educate is through them, because they're already on like platforms with them, WhatsApp groups. And if you can get to those pinch points, you can start to disseminate information really quickly.
So let's say you get all the farmers in the UK on board. How do you then scale to Europe and maybe the US?
Yeah, so let's take all the farmers in the UK on board first. That's not a bad target, actually. Let's just lock that in.
Dream big, dream big.
Done, it's done. Signed and sealed. So what is obviously what you just set up a Danish entity, which is our first subsidiary abroad, which is quite exciting. The Danes are really forward thinking in food. So to give,
they have those tall farms where they farm.
The vertical farms and things.
Farming, that's it.
I mean, they're a different nation, right? They're the Nordics. Obviously, we're always banging on about the Nordics, about how they just do things cooler than us.
Culturally, also sustainability is a huge part of the way that they live their lives.
Exactly.
It's ironic, given there's so much oil coming out of Norway.
This is also true.
This is also true.
But to touch on the Danes for a minute, the difference are they're 6 million people and we're 60 million in the UK. They produce 3 times more food than they consume. We import 40% of our food. So they are fundamentally different economies. And so Denmark's just announced a £1 billion subsidy to biochar, which is the first country to do that, which shows how the traction, the kind of traction the product's getting, which is really exciting, which will start in 2027. And actually that means we're quite excited to be there. And then even the Danish government, actually Foreign Office reached out to us and said, would you like to come to Denmark and stuff?
Cool.
And so it's a very active economy in this kind of space, which is exciting. And so Denmark next, and Ireland. We're talking to a lot of people in Ireland about expansion there. With a farming business or agricultural business, though, it is hard to just, it's not, and it may be unwise to jump too far too quickly, because a lot of farmers will hear about your product and again talk to the neighboring farmer about it, and so you actually have quite an old school go-to market approach, which is quite organic and excuse the pun there, but that's sort of the approach we're taking. And so it is about sitting in the pub and chatting to farmers and going to the next door farm. That is the best traction we've been getting so far.
Are there any countries in particular that you think would be harder to break into because of the way that they perceive sustainability culturally, or because of legislation? Yeah, true.
I mean, look, this is the big sort of bipolar nation right now, which most people are aware of, is the US. So even before Biden's big Inflation Reduction Act, which put a lot of money into green technologies, and a lot of companies started moving from Europe over to the US, and some actually companies I know quite regret that decision now, as things are starting to shift quite heavily around this kind of area of technology. But it's not, the US also has a lot of challenges internally. When you're trying to break into the US, you basically go at a state level, and each state has very different rules and regulations. They're almost like different countries. So you can't just sort of crack the US. You need to really pick your state right to start in, and then expanding from there is also quite challenging. So a lot of European companies, they see the US as this huge, exciting market, and they should. But getting it right is much easier said than done. So I would say that is quite a hard nation to break into. Whereas actually setting up in Denmark, oh my God.
Been a dream.
Can't believe it. It's so easy. They're so friendly. They ask us all these things. It's really great. Everyone there is super talented and bright. And it's just been a really lovely experience. Also, if you ever go to Copenhagen, it's a beautiful city. So it's a nice place to visit.
Yeah. And what particular regions in the UK would you say are the pillars of the business right now, or will be the pillars of the business? Yeah, so
we're split basically. So I'm based in London at the moment, but I'm moving to Manchester. My co-founder is based just north of Edinburgh, and then our ops is largely based in the northwest of England, so between Manchester and Penrith in Cumbria. we're going to keep, I think, that base, if you like, as we scale. So we'll have a lot of R&D up in Edinburgh, closely linked to the university. We'll have our operations, marketing and sales in Manchester, but also we'll have a core team around sort of innovation and finance down in London. So if they're listening, then I'm not going to move you all to Manchester, which I know has been a cause for concern for some. But the Northwest is also quite an exciting place in the UK right now. It's kind of bucked the trend in a lot of places across the UK in terms of the last 10 years of growth and startups. It's got a very active combined authority, the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, which also supports investors and startups really, really heavily. And so there's just stuff popping out there all the time. And there's more and more events I'm going to, more and more other startups here that are moving to that area. So it seems like the right place to be right now.
So what's been your biggest hurdle?
Biggest hurdle? I'm guessing this is a business question. Biggest hurdle, I think, was establishing ourselves initially with large companies. So we know, and where a lot of companies that have been quite like ours have failed, is not getting, I mentioned that 3-pronged business model at the start, around the heat, the biochar with farming groups, and the carbon credits. You need to kind of get all of those 3 to work quite quickly to make the business model scalable. And so when you start out, me and Hamish, young, excited lads, trying to get our business off the ground, you are literally 2 guys with a pitch deck going around, companies with billion-pound turnovers saying, we've got this idea, we need to put all this kit on your site. How do you feel about it? And they've never seen the kit before. They don't know us. That's a really tough sell. And so I'm really pleased with our existing partners because they bought into us early on. And actually, we had one partner pull out after 9 months, which was like quite a sort of worrying moment because we're like, oh God, that was our industrial base. And that's purely because they were bought out by a big Austrian firm and their whole company restructured, shifted, and they were like, this is not the right time. And that's fair enough to them. But those were that early hurdle was probably the biggest one, because as soon as we got those longer term contracts solidified and got into those big industrial and agricultural companies, we then had a really logical, scalable business model. So that was hurdle number 1. Hurdle number 2, I would say, is actually hiring great people in a space that doesn't exist. So when we look for a pyrolysis operations manager, for instance, which is pyrolysis is the process we use to make our biochar product, I looked on LinkedIn. They don't exist, so there isn't one.
It sounds very niche.
Quite niche, exactly. And a lot of these new net zero kind of jobs are niche. They're niche right now. They won't be in future. And so we actually set up an apprenticeship scheme now as well to feed in under him, and we've hired around him. He took quite a risk coming from quite an established large business, but he saw what me and Hamish were doing. This is Nick, our head of operations, and jumped ship to join us, which was great. But definitely, skills, net zero skills, are something a lot of startups like us are actually having to build ourselves and train ourselves. And a lot of it's on the job training, because there's no course for this yet. So that's been another hurdle we sort of overcome, which was quite big.
What's the best piece of advice that you've received from an investor or partner?
Oh, I mean, some of this is going to be cliche. One is definitely around the team matters the most. Building a great team, and people have heard this loads of times before, but I'm so proud of the sort of squad we've put together. And the other thing is definitely the second bit is actually, I think Ed in your previous podcast says this as well, but trying to make yourself quite redundant is quite important as well, and that links to team. You don't want to make yourself the bottleneck of decisions of the business. You want to basically, if you go on holiday for a week, you want no one to miss you, because actually they know exactly what's going on. They've got the skills and they've been empowered to make decisions for the business. So where we've built a really great team, and this is a little bit nepotistic, but a lot of the people that are in the business are people actually I met over pizza and beers in our co-work space. And I think the best way to, this is another good piece of advice someone said to me, is that the best way to interview someone is to interview them when they don't know they're being interviewed. And so that's been really helpful, because you can chat to someone, find out what they're doing. They've got no idea what my business is yet, or what we're trying to do, and really figure out what makes them tick. And then perhaps ask them to join you at a later date.
Yeah, you get a very authentic reaction as well.
Really authentic.
And you can see who the person is and their personality, and takes away that sort of tension and anxiety that you might have during an interview. So
exactly.
I can really see how that would work.
And then it makes a bit of a family feel as well, because as people start to join you from and I feel slightly bad for some of the business I've stolen some people from, in effect, in the same work building, but it's all a good laugh now. But they, when you bring a good family together at the start, it does make it a much happier place to work. And I think that drives everyone as well.
And I remember in your email you said the pros and cons of nepotism. What are the cons?
The cons are I'm potentially narrowing myself, or have done to date, from the whole wider world. You know, there's loads of people out there.
Fine.
And in some ways you're actually sort of, and perhaps I'm building my own internal biases into the people I'm hiring. And I'm picking people who perhaps I know I'm getting on with really well. And so I do try and check myself when I see someone who's really great over that pizza and think, wait, make sure you're doing this for the right reasons.
So by nepotism, you mean that it's someone who you've met through mutual connections? Is that what you mean?
Someone who's you meet up for mutual connections, someone who's said, oh, you know, go and have a coffee. And I often think, and I did this in my early career, I don't know about you guys, but when someone reaches out on LinkedIn and says, oh, can we go for a coffee for 30 minutes? I think it shows a really good side of that person's character.
Yeah.
Jump on it.
Jump on it. Yeah, exactly. But you could argue that the con is, you argue that, you know, if you're not putting out really clean cut job descriptions and doing a really fair, open hiring process, you're more likely to hire with internal bias and perhaps not get the kind of diversity you should be getting. So, but I think, me and Hamish have been quite aware of that from the start. So I think we've been really checking ourselves to make sure we bring in the right people. Yeah.
And what qualities are you looking for in that informal pizza chat? What stands out?
Oh, it definitely depends on the role. But broadly, I do look for people who are quite driven and passionate. And I don't really care about what they're passionate in, but the fact that they have an element of drive and they're excited by something, I think that's really important. I definitely have a bit of a bias towards people who have worked on slightly unusual projects before or startups before. I think someone that helps in a startup because it means they usually think a bit differently. And the big thing for us has probably been adaptability. As we've grown, we have pivoted and changed a lot of things in the business for the better. But for gauging with someone you know can handle that and handle those changes and enjoys change. Actually, that's quite important. Enjoys change. That's also a really key part of who we are, I think.
So you're obviously a completely new space. You're hiring for roles which didn't exist before. So when you're about to hire someone, does that individual, they wouldn't have the experience you're necessarily looking for because the role hasn't existed before. So how do you navigate that?
Well, that links to my earlier point about the drive, really. If they're keen to learn and they're really keen to get stuck in, and I think our two guys in ops, actually Nick and Darren, are really good examples of this, and actually both worked for quite big established companies for quite a long time before this, and both took a bit of a punt in joining us. So perhaps breaking my usual mold actually of who I'm hiring. But they've learned on the job, and they will if they don't know the answer, they'll go and find it. And that's just been a really great thing for us to see. It means, particularly for Nick, for Hamish, our CTO as well, it means he can zoom out a bit and think more about strategy because he knows he's got great people underneath him who are handling the day-to-day of like things around heavy machinery and how those one tiny oil ring just broke and it turned out that size doesn't exist anywhere in the UK or something random like that can happen. And then Nick and Darren just adapt and suddenly that they've found an oil ring around the corner and they've sorted it out or something like that. So yeah, that's a very specific niche issue we had recently. But that's a really important part is adaptability and being able to learn.
Thank you so much, Alex, for coming.
Thanks for having us. Cheers. All the best.